Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Hi everyone, welcome to another recommendations video, and today I'm going to be giving you my ultimate fall vibes recommendation list here. So this video is sponsored by my channel members. If you don't know, one of the perks of being a channel member for the Book Refuge is that you monthly get to vote on a video to sponsor, one that you want to make sure gets made and that you would like to see. And this one was pretty much unanimously voted on by everyone that we wanted a fall vibes book. I had said this was kind of like books for spooky season, but I'm going to make a different video that does have like spooky and paranormal recommendations for it. So this one has kind of a gambit. The way that I went to this one is definitely, as I said, more about the vibes of it. Books that I feel cozy with, that I reach for when it is sweater weather, as it were. Books that just really make me feel the atmosphere of fall. So that does mean we have a good amount of some darker books for sure. I like to be cozy when I read those, as well as some that just kind of like embody fall to me, based on either their title or the feelings that it evokes. Sweater is bothering me. So you'll see, I'll explain for each one as we go. And then at the end, because you know, I am a romance channel, so that is our #1 focus. But at the end, I do have 2 bonus books that don't necessarily fit into the romance category, but I know not all of us only read romance. Like me, I read 99.9% romance, but there is still that 0.01% that isn't. So as I said, I'll have a couple bonus books for that. But let's go ahead and go through it. These aren't in any particular order or anything. They just all evoke the vibes for me. So something that evokes the spooky and fall vibes for me is, of course, going to be some serial killer romance. And we have Butcher and Blackbird, which by now I feel like everyone has seen this cover. Everybody knows what this series is about. The Ruinous Love trilogy. And Brynn Weaver, man, she really struck gold with this series, and I'm someone who definitely is in on it. And it started this mini wave of the serial killer books being a bit more humorous, as it were, while still being very dark and very sexy, and dark as in the aspect of some accidental cannibalism going on, some serial killers who hunt serial killers, the great banter between Butcher and Blackbird. And I mean, this is a book that I think for many years to come is going to speak of fall and October vibes to people, but you can enjoy it any year, any time of the year round for sure. But I read this for a patron the very first time, and I still think about this book sometimes. There are some crazy scenes in here. And though I will say Leather and Lark didn't hold up quite as well for me as this one did, just being honest, but I'm still very intrigued for the last book in the series, and I still think this is absolutely worth the read. I know a lot of people love the audio, though I do know that this first audio was narrated by someone who's a bit on the outs with the romance community and narrators at this point. I do think that the audio is still worth it. If that isn't something that bothers you anyway, then it doesn't matter, but definitely really enjoyed this one. Okay, then there's a series that I can really find a way to make it work for every season, because I want to read it in every season, but I'm still going to keep bringing it up. I'm going to keep bringing it up until I'm blue in the face, and that's going to be the Kindled series for sure. This series absolutely gives me the fall vibes. I do have my hardcover editions here, but even the paperback and Kindle version really give me the fall vibes as well, with always the different types of fire and flame and lights that are on the covers of them. But yeah, these books are dystopian. They are apocalypse. The world is completely different, and we follow different women as they find love during the time of apocalypse. It begins, you can start with either Last Light or with Haven in the series. The series has its conclusion coming in October, but if you're in Claire Kent / Noelle Adams Facebook group, you'll know there's going to be a spin-off series, and she actually has already shared the title and the cover of that book with us. So definitely follow her Facebook group if you want to know. I won't spoil it for you, but she said that will be coming in early 2025. So anyway, this series, this first book here, this one is about Lainey and Travis, and how they end up traveling together and eventually being kind of like partners with benefits, and they adopt a dog together, and they try to survive the apocalypse while making their way towards a place where some of their loved ones and town members have ended up. They ended up getting left behind to take care of different family members of their own, and those family members have died, and now they're kind of on their own traveling, and Travis is like, hey, we should travel together, and she's like, no, I don't want to. Well, that might not be the smartest choice she's ever made. And when they do end up traveling together, she ends up thinking, hey, why don't we find some pleasure together instead of suffering all the time? And they do end up doing that. But yeah, and then this one, I can't remember the heroine's name in this one, but this one is Cole and... who is this heroine in this one? Dell? It's Dell, yeah. But these were two sisters, and Brenna, she ends up getting taken in the beginning. And so Dell and Cole, he's trying to find his brother, she's trying to find her sister, and they end up working together to do that. But yeah, there are a lot of kind of simple goals in each of the books, which is why I find them very comforting. They're not trying to like be anything over the top, and there isn't any discussion about what like the world politics are as a whole or trying to bring us back from the brink. It's just all about survival, and that's what the series is about. It's love at the end of the world. That's what it's about. So love it. Okay, then I want to recommend a series from Claire Kingsley. This is actually the third book, and it's my favorite one in the series, so I'm holding up this one. But the series does start with Obsession Falls. The audiobooks are really amazing. I love those. I've read an arc of the first one and an arc of the third one. I didn't receive an arc of the second one, but that's okay. I've read them all. This one particularly does have a bit of serial killer stuff going on as well. Our hero is Garrett Haven, and he's a single dad. He has a teenage son. And our heroine is Harper, and she's new in town. She's there to actually take over the small town bakery for her aunt, who is, her health isn't the best. She can't really handle the bakery on her own anymore, and Harper takes it over. Garrett is also a police officer and a detective, and he ends up getting on a cold case when he finds some evidence from a cold case that no one has really looked into in years. Of course, that's why it's cold. We understand. But it seems to have maybe ramped up again. And now his interest in Harper may be putting her in danger because he's trying to catch this old killer, and that killer is still in the town. Like, we'll just say that. But I really loved the teenage son in this one. I loved how Harper and Garrett get together. I just really enjoyed this one so much. It was really, really good. And yeah, they were just so sweet. And I liked the suspense element in this one, my favorite of the other three, because a lot of times in small town suspense it ends up being that there's a stalker or there's something like that, and while this killer is stalking them, it's not a stalker because the person's in love with the girl and doesn't think she should be with someone else or hates her for any reason. It truly is a serial killer, and we need to stop him, and I just really like that part about it. So yeah, absolutely, Claire Kingsley. I think a lot of her books really give me fall vibes too, especially the I mean, not the Bailey brothers, but the family before that one that's on the winery. I can't remember what their family name is, but that one really gives fall vibes too. Okay, then I just want to throw up Unbreakable by Melanie Harlow. This whole series has, like, you know, the Cloverleaf Farms has like the leaves and the, you know, this one is an orchard and a winery. And this one, I believe that this woman is the oldest sister. Sylvia is the oldest sister. She's a single mom. And she ends up having a bit of a meltdown when her husband of 15 years left her for a younger woman, and that woman's pregnant. And this really affects Sylvia because they'd been trying to have another baby, I believe, and they couldn't. And then he cheated on her, and the mistress is pregnant, and that's no fun. And then we have Henry, who he's also divorced, and him and his wife, they had been trying to have kids and never could either. So for him, sex had become very much about like making the baby. So they both have had their issues with that. But she happens to be staying with her family after this divorce has happened, and Henry helps in the family business. And so they end up seeing each other and having a fling, and it's just supposed to be for the holiday, but they might want it to be forever, you know? So I think Melanie Harlow's another, there's just something about small town that says like fall vibes usually anyway. So this is, I think, book 4 in the series, but it is one of my favorite ones. So this one doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion. Okay, then, as I said, you know, we had to have a little bit of paranormal slip in here. So I got to share my classic Juliet Cross. I actually put in my Patreon just to ask my friends which books make them feel the fall vibes. And of course, people are going to be thinking of witches and werewolves and vampires and all that stuff. So Stay a Spell. We ain't surprised that I'm sharing this series. I absolutely adore Mateo and Evie. This one is a werewolf and a witch, and he's a werewolf who isn't able to transform. And so that's causing him some issues. And he goes to the Savoy sisters for help. Now, the thing is, witches aren't supposed to help vampires. They're enemies of theirs. But this book actually begins the question, like, why are we still enemies with werewolves? Should we still be enemies with werewolves? Maybe we should look into that and see why we're enemies and if we still should be. And that begins some questions we'll look at through the Stay a Spell series. But the series is absolutely just sweet as pie. Low angst for the most part through the whole thing. And yeah, I just adore. I mean, I'm a super simp. I'm a super biased girl because Juliet is one of my friends and I love her stories. But there's a reason why she gets brought up all the time, and it's because this series is amazing and it put her on the map. It's excellent. Okay, then we go a little bit darker. I wanted to include one of these books that had like a back to school element, because that is also fall and everything. And so this one, I have Brutal Ambition from San Mariano, which I know it gets brought up a lot, but this is a great one for getting like into her books, because this one is her most recent release, and it's also a standalone kind of. It does spin off from the Coastal Elites, but you can read this one as a standalone if you want to. And this involves like getting back to school. It starts at a Halloween party, and our heroine gets kind of tricked into going to it and going to a Halloween party, and she's going to be a virgin sacrifice and doesn't know it. Now, in the middle of this sacrifice that's going to happen, she gets rescued by our hero. She gets rescued by Killian, but he isn't rescuing her because he's some Prince Charming or because he really cares. He's rescuing her because the people doing this virgin sacrifice are idiots and they're going to cause problems. And he's like, this is the dumbest idea you guys have ever had. You can't do this. So he rescues her, and now she can't go back to her apartment. And he expects a little bit of a thank you payment for saving her. And in the beginning, he is kind of coercing her into this, but she's also like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, at least he's kind of giving me a choice and I'm not being like raped and murdered. So there's that. But after he gets a taste, he doesn't want to be done with her. And she's, now there's no escape, you know? And he's going to make sure that she's his. Now, something else I really liked about this and why it's like Brutal Ambition is that a lot of heroes written, or I say heroes, but you know what I mean, the male love interest by San Mariano usually comes from wealth, and that's where their power and their cockiness and their control comes from. Now, Killian, he's in a secret society, and he has clawed his way to that. He's been backed by other more powerful people, and so there are people that he owes favors to, people that he owes his loyalty to, and so he's a made man, but he's also been boosted to the level he's at through favors from other people. And if he wants to stay there, he has to either find a way to circumvent the fact that he owes them favors, or, you know, make them think that he's playing along with him. And that's going to put him and his love interest in some tricky positions, because they may not necessarily want him to be with this girl that he saved from death. And that's going to put them in some interesting situations. So I just like that, because this hero, I mean, many of her heroes are obviously devious and dark that way, but he has a few more challenges in his way than some of her other love interests who just do what they want, and it's the heroines that are dealing with everything. Killian has some mind games that he has to play himself, which I think are very interesting. Okay, then I want to share Bourbon and Lies by Victoria Wilder. This is one that a lot of people have been reading and loving lately. I read an arc of this one. I enjoyed it so much. Bourbon and Secrets is actually coming in a month or two, and I can't wait to read more. But this one involves the Witness Protection Agency and our heroine who sees something she shouldn't see, and she ends up in witness protection, and she ends up in this small town staying next door to an ex-police officer, or was he FBI agent? Now I can't remember. But he does have a canine companion, and they used to fight crime together. And a woman that he previously loved had like died during an operation, and so he carries a lot of guilt. He believes that there's a family curse that keeps them from being happy, and this woman who's living next door to him, he doesn't trust her. Her story doesn't check out to him, so he's very suspicious of her. Well, the thing is, of course her story doesn't check out. She's going under like false pretenses because of witness protection, but of course no one is supposed to know that that's why she's there, so she can't just come out and tell him, you know, why she's being sketchy or whatever. So he's very suspicious of her. But I did love that once, you know, he's in on what's going on, he is all in. He's very supportive. Him and his dog absolutely love her. And he's not going to let any part of her past kind of ruin what they are building together. Very intense third act. And I will just say the dog is fine, though the dog is in some dangerous situations sometimes. She is a canine officer, so she's a little extra special animal there. And Julep, she definitely has my heart. She's one of my favorite parts of this book. The dog was, for sure. Okay, now we have two historicals that I'll share. Now, for autumn and fall vibes, there are a lot of historicals that I could share, and I wanted to pick two that are a bit lesser known. You know, of course, there is the Lisa Kleypas classics that we could share for this, and I definitely have in years past. But again, wanted to bring some new ones in, turn your attention to some smaller authors, maybe, besides the Queen herself, right? So there is Hold Fast by Eliza MacArthur. So this is a Highlander romance, and we have our heroine who has actually just gotten out of a handfast. She was handfast with this absolute asshole. And if you've never heard of handfasting, because maybe you don't read Highlander romances or you haven't read one that had this, that is when you stay married for a year and a day. Well, you're like temporary married for a year and a day. You're allowed to have all the rights as a married couple would, and at the end of the year and the day, you're supposed to be able to get out of that situation and no one's reputation be ruined, because it was like a legal thing. And our heroine is absolutely abused and mistreated by the man she's handfast to. And so the day she's able to leave, she hightails it out of his keep and is getting out of there. She's actually a healer and like a midwife type person. And so she's looking for a place where she can be a healer. And she was actually offered a position by I can't remember if it was a lady or just a member of another keep or whatever, but she's making her way there to be a healer. And along the way, she runs into our hero. I think it's Ewan. I think the hero's name is Ewan in this one. Maybe I'm making that up. But he's looking for help because his little brother has been injured and is seriously ill. And he happens to run into this healer along the path. And he convinces her to come with him. He says, I will make sure you get where you're wanting to go after this, but I need help for my brother. I'll do whatever I have to do. So she agrees. She goes with him to the keep and starts caring for his brother. And very soon, you know, with her being there, he wants her to stay. He immediately is enamored with her after they talk and he's getting to know her. He wants her. Not only does he want to keep her because she is a healer, but he's falling for her. And she just is like so not interested in being claimed to a man again. That has been horrible for her. She's very distrustful. Again, with good reason, she is. But yeah, this was really good. This was really unique. There are a few things about it that are a bit grating because Eliza MacArthur does like to push her feminism in a certain way, even though she's writing medieval Scottish romance. That's okay. It wasn't so much that it makes me dislike it, right? And I think a lot of you would like it just fine. I mean, I loved these two together. They were wonderful. This is the same author who wrote Soft Flannel Hank, and yeah, I hope she does write the next one in the series. She said she'll be more in the series, so I'm looking forward to it. And then I have a Viking romance for you. I don't know about you, but Vikings really make me think of fall. I don't know why, but they do. And there's this one. Now, this has a hideous cover, and when I show it to you, you're not going to be interested. But there are a few books that have hideous covers that hold some of my favorite stories within them, okay? And we just gotta roll with it sometimes, all right? So this one is called God's Eye by Susan Finetti. And another reason why I love this is Pam Godwin actually gave me this recommendation years ago. And I've read the first 2 in the series. I've never finished the series yet. I actually have the other 2 on a list of like historicals that I want to get to. But this first one is actually about a female warrior and a Viking. And she is said to have God's eye because she has one of her eyes that looks different. I can't remember if she just has heterochromia or like what it was about her, but they think she's like marked by the gods. But she's a female warrior. She fights for her clan. She's pretty badass. There's our hero who is from a like kind of opposing clan, but they decide to have but the clans are kind of in a truce at the time. And when she was young, actually, she saved this boy from being like killed by his father, basically. Stopped him being like beaten to death. And he's never forgotten what she looked like. Even though she was little, he was little, he remembers her eye. Now, fast forward, she's a warrior, he's a warrior. And there's a battle that they're in and he gets hurt. And she ends up bringing him to a healer and he sees her and he's like, this is the second time you saved my life. Because he immediately recognizes her eye and is like, there's no one else like you. And now he wants her for himself. And she's like, I'm a warrior. I'm not going to be with anybody. Don't want that. And he goes about pursuing her and making her his. Now this series is very violent. There's a lot of SA. There's a lot of scary things. Like, they are Viking raiders. That is what they do. It's not excuses for them, but when they raid a camp, they rape the women, take them as their own, force them to do what they want. So there's a lot of heavy things in here. There's also a big trigger warning for loss of a child in this one. So be prepared for that. But this, I have never forgotten certain scenes of this book. I think it's been 3 years since I read this first one, and I have never forgot it. The second one, I can't remember the name right now, but that one was also very powerful. So if you like the darker stuff, if you're someone who's looking for Viking romance, people ask me for those recs all the time. I really don't have any. I've only read like 2 or 3 Viking romance. Really, honestly, I promise I would make a specific video if I wanted to. But this is one that I'll always recommend because if you like darker romance and you like historical romance, whew, it has an HA. I will promise you that. There are times you won't be sure how. It definitely does. Okay, so those are all my recs that are strictly romance. Now, like I said, I would have 2 bonus books for you. One of them is a like high fantasy story and one of them is actually a nonfiction. So I'll start with the high fantasy, and that is Empire the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. There are 2 books out in the series so far. There's one more coming. I highly recommend the audiobook. Fantastic. But this is about Gabriel, what's his last name? Gabriel de Leon, who is a silver saint. He's a member of a holy brotherhood that is dedicated to defending the realm and church from the creatures of the night. But even the silver order cannot stem the tide once daylight fails us, and now only Gabriel remains. So there's literally a world where like there's like no sun anymore, and so the vampires are able to like take over. And this story, the way that it begins is actually Gabriel's in prison in the beginning, and there is this vampire named which I don't know if I remember his name, imprisoned. What's the guy's name? Hold on. Oh, look at the map in here. This book is also illustrated, by the way. What's his name? There's Gabriel and Chevalier is his name. And Jean-Francois is charged by his vampire queen to take down Gabriel's story before they execute him, whatever they're going to do to him, we don't know. So he's being held captive there, and Chevalier is his like telling his story. So this whole story is told, and this is a bit like annoying for some people, but the whole story is being like told to Chevalier. And so there are interjections between them as you go through the story, and we talk about not only where like Gabriel came from, what led him to be a silver saint, losses he's had in his life, and then the story of him being told about this holy grail that's supposed to be able to save them all from the vampires. Now, tiny bit of like a spoiler just to explain, like that holy grail is actually a person. There's a person who's this holy grail, and he will be charged with protecting this person and finding out how we use them to be this holy grail. So I'll just say that. So yeah, Empire of the Vampire, love, like, honestly, I've never been more shell-shocked or hooked into a book. Like, this was intense. Also, if you get a, like, physical copy of this, I don't know if the ebooks do, because I don't have one. These are illustrated. There are illustrations throughout this. And then, so yeah, this is Empire of the Vampire and Empire of the Damned, I think is the second one. That one just came out this year. I read that like so fast. It was so good. But yeah, highly recommend these. These definitely put me in a fall vibe for sure. I mean, vampires just always will. It's absolutely the truth for sure. And then the one that is nonfiction. So I've said many times I really enjoy true crime. I'm a romance reader and a true crime lover. Oh, I keep almost hitting that. And one of the nonfiction books about true crime that I listened to, it was last year, was Unmasked by Paul Holes. He is one of the investigators responsible for unmasking the Golden State Killer. That isn't the only cold case he's ever worked, but it was using new DNA technologies to capture someone who previously was able to get away with crimes for 40 years. He committed numerous rapes, killed, I think, 9 to 12 people, and just was getting away with it and living like a normal grandpa, living out his life. And Paul Holes is one of the people responsible for that. So this book is really about kind of like how he, like, it's like his autobiography as well as how the part that he played in it. Now, I really got back into true crime actually when the Golden State Killer was caught. I, of course, have watched different crime things my whole life. My dad's really into it. I've seen, you know, episodes of 48 Hours with it. I used to watch all the crime shows, all the CSIs, the NCIS. There was all these things we used to watch, right? But I would more so just like listen when my dad would tell me about stuff, or he would have Forensic Files on when I was a kid. Sorry, I'm going on a rant. I know a lot of you guys watch true crime stuff too, because you've told me so. So, but I really credit in 2016 when he was captured is when I started watching a bunch of stuff about the Golden State Killer, and then it led me into these other things. And now, as I've said, I don't watch much TV or fictional things anymore. I mostly watch or listen to podcasts about true crime. And a lot of that came from, I became really inspired by Paul Holes. And so I've read I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which was started by Michelle McNamara, who sadly died before the Golden State Killer was captured. There was also one that Billy did. I can't remember his last name now, but Billy is like a reporter and investigator who him and Paul were paired up for different things they worked on. So I read Billy's book, I read Michelle's book, and then when Paul's book came out, I read that. And he, of course, narrates the audiobook himself. And I thought it was very interesting. Paul Holes, I consider him one of my real life heroes. I think he's an amazing man. And just the passion that he has for victims. He's very into the forensic side of things as well as being an investigator. So he does know a lot of the science and the mental side of things on it. And his book was fascinating because it does talk about the toll, you know, because it has his journey. So it's how he got into true crime, you know, how being an investigator really like consumed him, how it cost him his first marriage, how he, you know, has had to look out for his mental health, how he went through alcoholism at one point because of this, and just like the toll that it took. And he was working, you know, on this Golden State Killer thing for like 25 years, not constantly, but at different parts. And it wasn't until like months after he retired even that we were finally able to take down the Golden State Killer. So anyway, that was my little rant about it. But I am just so intrigued by Paul Holes. I still listen and read to like everything he puts out these days. And so this story was really powerful to me. It isn't just the Golden State Killer case he'll go into. He talks about a lot of the other famous cases he's been involved in, including the Peterson case, as well as J.C. Dugard, like all of these things in there. So it was very good. So anywho, that is a nonfiction a couple I actually just named that I'm very interested in. So let me know some of your books that get you interested in fall and spooky things. Like I said, I will hopefully be making a paranormal one coming soon, before the end of September. And I will link other videos I've made along this vein as well. So I'll have links to all these books down below if you'd like to purchase it. If you use my Amazon links, it does help out the channel as well, whether you get an ebook, audiobook, or a paperback or hardcover. All of that helps me a little bit here. So thank you so much for watching, my friends, and we'll see you next time. Bye.